Ah, good morning. So obviously, a fair bit has happened since uh, the last the last live stream we did. Um, Obviously, the Africa Cup of Nations has reached the knockout stage, and of course, the Comoros Cameroon game did raise a lot of questions, and a lot of it's to do with squad rules because they had no fit goalkeeper due to injury and the COVID pandemic. Now, that it was a very good game to watch, to be fair, because they put a left back in goal, and he played very, very well. But I do think with what we've seen with uh, European League games being affected and called off, um, we're going to see, I think, squad rules uh, change. I think for this upcoming World Cup, I don't think FIFA want to have games not take place. They're going to have to look at squad rules and having enlarged squads. They're going to have to look at protocols in place, obviously, to make sure games get played. Basically, so that's something to come out of the Africa Cup of Nations. Obviously, the Gambia are playing Cameroon in the first quarter final later today. I am looking forward to watching that game. So that'll be very, very interesting. If the Cameroon get knocked out by the Gambia, that would be one of the shocks, I think, of international football in recent times. Another thing to talk about is the channel has hit 860 subscribers, which is a nice little milestone to hit. So next milestone is obviously 870, 880, something like that. Try and get as close to 1,000 subscribers as we can before the summer. Um, and hopefully we can do that. And of course, we've got the Six Nations and the FA Cup fourth round literally in the next couple of days. Six Nations starts next weekend, and the FA Cup fourth round is obviously being played next weekend. No replays, so could we have seen the end of FA Cup replays? Considering that obviously next season with the World Cup being taking place when it is, and this season getting suspended and fixture congestion, we may never see FA Cup replays ever again. So that's something to bear in mind when looking at the FA Cup. And there's predicted to be bad weather next weekend, so we'll see if any FA Cup matches get postponed, any Six Nations matches get postponed. There's some bad winter weather predicted to come in a week's time, so that's something to keep an eye out for. Um, the Novak Djokovic situation obviously has obviously passed. However, that has raised questions about international athletes and vaccination status. The Olympics is looming as well. In the Winter Olympics in Beijing is looming as well. A lot of controversy surrounding the Winter Olympics in Beijing. But we didn't have this controversy before the last Olympics in China, so a lot has changed in the last, 14 years since the Bird's Nest had its grand opening, and we had the Summer Olympics there, and Usain Bolt, breaking his records, and um, some of the British athletes, doing really well in their various events. A lot has changed since the last time the Olympics was in China, politically and socially. A lot has changed. And there's still obviously the diplomatic boycotts. The NHL isn't sending players. That's to do with COVID rules in place and the protocols in place, and so it's raised a lot of questions about the whole Olympic. How politicised has the Olympics become? Why a lot of host nations don't want it anymore. No one wants to bid for it anymore. Um, So there is that. Obviously, Owen Farrell is out for the entire Six Nations. That throws a possible spanner in the works for England, but also could be a silver lining. So that's a debating point: is Owen Farrell's unavailability for the Six Nations due to injury? He's injured both his ankles. He had injured one in the autumn tests. Took some time out in training. He injured his other one. So Owen Farrell is set to miss the entire Six Nations. So that gives a chance for younger players, depth players to get a run out in the 10, 12 jerseys, so inside centre and fly half. That does pose some questions for Eddie Jones as England coach. in selecting players in those positions. But it does make for an interesting dynamic to the Six Nations. But there's a lot of uncapped players. We're halfway through a World Cup cycle. Um, I mean, Owen Farrell will be 32 come the next World Cup, so it's a good opportunity uh, for England to experiment and get some young players some experience in the next year or two before the World Cup. Scotland have got a very young, inexperienced side as well. There's a lot of players being called up for the first time who haven't got a lot of experience at this level. So I think this is going to be a very, very interesting Six Nations. As I say, halfway through a World Cup cycle. Obviously, we've also got Blake Ferguson, former NRL star who went over to Japan to play rugby union professionally, is obviously in a lot of legal trouble. And again, that casts a very negative light on the culture um, within rugby league and rugby union to a certain extent. With some of the antics, he's got involved with possession of cocaine and assault charges, and so there's a possibility he may be deported back to Australia. But with the Australians blocking, access for a lot of their citizens overseas due to the COVID pandemic, that's going to be an interesting story. Should that continue to rumble on? But I think that's career done for Blake Ferguson in either code. Um, you know, there's several high profile athletes who regularly are controversial and divisive. Um, so we'll see what pans out with Blake Ferguson stuck in Japan if you're a rugby league fan. Um, Obviously, this is the first season for the Super League being on free to air TV with Channel 4, and I've done a video on that. So we'll see how the viewership figures um, do. We'll see what the audience figures on television are like, and the feedback that uh, broadcasters get, and hopefully it's a positive for the sport. I think it's a positive step, but I think more needs to happen. I think there's definitely it's a small step, but it's a positive step. So it'd be interesting to see if Channel 4 decides to grow on that contract and actually show more live games than in the following seasons and build upon their product. But we'll have to see what this inaugural season, how it pans out for them, what the viewership figures are like, the feedback as well, and hopefully grow the imprint of the game to a wider audience. With only 10 regular season and 2 post-season games um, being on free-to-air TV, it would be nice to see more free-to-air coverage, but it is a start. And of course, we've got the Rugby League World Cup delayed by a year at the end of the year, with the BBC having full rights in this country, which is again a positive. And again, it's a great chance for the sport to grow. This is a sport that is in deep financial crisis. Even before the pandemic, there was money issues within rugby league, and the current TV deal, it has been shaped by the last 2 years. With the failure of the Toronto Wolfpack, with the Ottawa Races not getting really off the ground and playing in Canada at all, and having to relocate twice, there's definitely been some missteps and misdirections that um, the RFL have taken, the Super League has taken, um, and when the Wolfpack just were unable to complete the 2020 season, they only got 5 games played, and then that season being so badly affected, the writing was on the wall for the overseas Canadian experiment, and I do think it was badly just badly planned. Um, while the idea was good on the ideas table, in actual practice, there was a lot of practicality issues with it anyway. And long term, it was gonna, unless you were gonna have, real financial backing and real massive growth within the sport in the UK, and it was to make a lot more money. It wasn't really financially viable. Now, I'm not against expanding the sport in North America, or seeing the North American game go professional. But there are better ways to do it. It was mismanaged from the start. There were issues from the start, while the North American fans bought into the sport and continue to buy into the sport to make it a viable, um, professional sport. There are other ways to go about it. I think it has impacted the, the Super League, Championship, and League One structures over here. The Ottawa Aces, again, they deferred their entry for a year. They were meant to actually join this year finally as the Ottawa Aces. They were originally, obviously, the Hemel Hempstead Stags, so they were going to start again, like the Wolfpack in League One, work their way through the tiers into the Super League. That would be the plan. And before they even play a game in Canada, they've already relocated to Cornwall. Now, is that the right location? Probably not. But they've had to relocate back to the UK. It's nice to see again a rugby league team in the south half of England. However, in the southwest, especially Cornwall, not, I would say, the prime location, but it was probably the only location that was willing to take them. So we'll see what happens. Obviously, long term with the Cornish experiment, the Cornish Rugby League Club, as it's known. So the Ottawa Races, yeah, again, that never really got off the ground, and again, that's been an expensive failure. So it there are a lot of issues, I would think, with rugby league in this country. The delay of the World Cup, the fact the RFL had to take emergency loans off the government 2 years ago, the fact that the government is actually pumping in money to support the game. Um, so there are issues there. Two good bits of news. One, Bath actually won yesterday. Yes, they did. Just they are in a lot of trouble this season. Uh, and Swindon Town versus Scunthorpe would be, yeah, I think that's going to be a good game. Considering where Swindon Town were before the start of the season, on the verge of going out of business. Um, it doesn't matter if you're going. That's great that you're going, but uh, it is what it is. COVID side of things, yes. As I was discussing at the start of the live stream, I think FIFA are going to have to look at the squad rules for the World Cup. What we saw with Comoros versus Cameroon, where they couldn't field a goalkeeper and they had 7 players out. There was a fear that the game wouldn't take place, and it would, of course. I don't think FIFA allowed that at the World Cup. So I think, and what we've seen with English football, especially with the amount of games being postponed because of COVID over the last year and a bit, I do think squad rules are going to have to be looked at. Um, quite frankly, because I don't think, with the fact that the seasons in Europe are being affected for this season and next season as well with the fixture congestion, I don't think we can, or the FIFA can allow World Cup games not to take place and be cancelled or rearranged. There just isn't the space to refixture them, and it would be kind of embarrassing for FIFA with their Qatar experiment. Should anything go wrong there, they want to obviously have a successful World Cup, but it won't be because it's Qatar. But yes, no, hopefully she's okay and she gets better. But there's been a lot of issues with the pandemic in schools. We've got a lot of staff off where I work with COVID, and most of them, guess what, have kids. So yes, hopefully she's okay in time for you to go to Swindon versus Scunthorpe. So hopefully that she's well enough in time to go with you. That'll be a good experience. I first went to a football match on my birthday when I was 7, and that was at Anfield. So I was very very lucky. But yes, hopefully, yeah, enjoys the occasion and it's a good day out. The weather's nice, but we are, as I say, expecting some bad weather in the next week or so, just in time for the first round of the Six Nations and the FA Cup fourth round. So it'll be hopefully might be a leveller for some of these sides. Obviously, Watford sacking Claudio Ranieri and going with Roy Hodgson. Everton approached Derby County and they were turned down for Wayne Rooney's services. Now Frank Lampard is in the frame to take over at Everton. I'm surprised Frank Lampard's been out of work as long as he has. Considering the restraints and issues he had at Chelsea with the transfer embargo and not being allowed to sign any new players, much like Wayne Rooney at Derby, I'm surprised he's been out of work as long as he has. I don't think he had an unsuccessful spell. It's just obviously didn't win any silverware, and of course, Abramovich expects silverware in Chelsea. Even if you win silverware, we'll sack your manager anyway. So I think, yeah, Frank Lampard being out of work as long as he has been has surprised me. Um, so we'll see if Everton decide to get Frank Lampard in place as manager. That in itself, the fact that Derby turned down their approach for Wayne Rooney is something. Oh dear, she wants to go wearing a Spud shirt. Oh dear. Yes, that that will be interesting. But you know, it'll still be an experience, and the fact that Swindon nearly went out of business, in the summer and was saved in mid-August, but they literally just days before the start of the season, and the fact that they're still a going concern is an amazing. I mean, it's only Macclesfield since COVID hit that have gone bust. Although Derby are close and they could run out of money by they've got like 2-3 days before they run out of money, according to some sources. Although there is a takeover bid that is in the process of going through. And the EFL have made no attempt to block the Binney family bid from New England in America to take over the club. Uh, Derby's future is still highly uncertain, and the bid is worth about 28 million. But there's also the 20 odd million worth of debt that is on top of that. So Derby, whether they manage to complete the season or not, there's still a lot of uncertainty around the Derby County situation. But I can't see the EFL letting them go bust. Quite frankly. So we'll see what happens with Derby County. But there are other clubs as well that are in serious financial difficulty as we are doing this live stream. Um, the fact that only Macclesfield is the only team to go belly up in the last 2 years is amazing. Um, yeah, the Man City game was a huge boost. And they do play in a certain way, an attractive way. Um, but they basically had to cobble together a squad. So the 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 way the players have gelled together is it doesn't matter what level you're playing at. If you've cobbled together a team pretty much overnight, they play an attractive style. I do think, yeah, they sort of a little bit naive in some of their play. They gifted two really soft goals and a soft free kick, which was three of the goals basically were gifted to Man City, but they caused them problems. They did expose some weaknesses that Man City have. And what I find interesting is since watching that game and reviewing that game, is that Man City have only won the FA Cup twice under the current ownership. So in the last since 2007, Man City have only won the FA Cup twice. So and they've lost another, I think, another final in there against Wigan. So they haven't had the success that people realise. And yeah, Man City, while they're doing really well in the league, they do have their issues. Um, and yeah, so Man City are vulnerable. And another thing is Swindon used to be a Premier League side, so obviously a lot has happened since the early 90s till now, and obviously Man City and Swindon were in different directions in that time. Although Man City at one point were playing in similar divisions to Swindon and the lower levels of the English game during the last 30 years. But yes, Swindon were a Premier League side in the early 90s, and they do have the unenviable record having the worst defensive record of all time for goals conceded in a Premier League season. So that's something that I don't think any club, even Derby County's shocking season of 11 points, their defence was nowhere near as bad as Swindon's was in the early 90s. Admittedly, the Premier League structure was different. There were more teams, there was more games to be played when Swindon were a Premier League side. So again, that record, you have to put an asterisk by it, but they do have the worst Premier League defensive record of all time with over 100 goals conceded. So yeah, that's something that I don't think any team wants. It's an unenviable record, but it's a record nonetheless, and it's a bit of interesting footballing history there. And people do tend to forget that Swindon Town were a Premier League club 30 odd years ago, 20 odd years ago. Obviously, a lot has happened since then, and league positions have changed, and where the team is at is obviously Swindon's gone through some tough times. But yeah, they were a Premier League side at one point, and people tend to forget that. They do. Oldham Athletic is another ex-Premier League side that's struggling in the lower divisions, and again, bad ownership. And questions do have to be asked of the EFL in regards to the directors' test, as they call it these days. The fit of proper persons test is layman's terms. With some clubs' ownership, there are questions. I mean, Hull have just changed owners, so the family that owned the Egyptian family that owned Hull are no longer in charge. And what they do, they sack the manager. Even though in the last few games, they're now 10 points clear of relegation. When the takeover was going through, they were in the relegation zone. They've gone on a little unbeaten streak of Hull, and as reward, sack the manager. I don't get that. Um, so there are clubs who are having takeovers as we are, doing this live stream. There are other clubs that we do know are in financial difficulty. Southend United is a club that I do know is struggling financially and has been struggling financially for a while, even before COVID. So yeah, as I say, I'm very surprised that only the one club has has gone out of business in the last 2 years. Of course, Bury was just before, but it does surprise me when there were warnings this time last year and this time, last winter that 16, 17 clubs were on the verge of going out of business and up to 60 clubs were in financial difficulty. While clubs are still in financial difficulty, and we may see further clubs, struggle to survive. I think with the negative press that has come out in regards to football finances over the last 2 years, if any further teams were to go out of business, huge question. There'd be a lot of pressure on the EFL, the FA, the Premier League from a PR standpoint, the public relations point of view, and how they've been dealing with things. And yes, Swindon Town now has a stable financial footing, and with the style of football they play, I don't think they'll be in League Two too much longer. I think they'll be going upwards rather than downwards. But the fact that Swindon nearly went out of business only 8 months ago tells you all you need to know about the situation in the professional game. And Derby County, are obviously in trouble. And yeah, question marks have to be asked about, how clubs are run once owners, get their hands on them. And and there have been question marks over Arsenal and Everton's ownership in recent years. There's been question marks, obviously, the attempted blocking of the takeover of Newcastle. I think there's question marks about that, but the Derby County proposed takeover, there seems to be no barriers in place because the EFL doesn't want this club to fail because games have been played this season. It makes the EFL look really bad. But the Bury situation a couple of years ago, what's happening with Oldham, Swindon nearly going bust. There are currently a lot of questions about who owns clubs. That 50+1 rule, the German style rule, with what the European Super League debacle. Football's not as popular as it thinks it is. There's in the sense of it's not winning any popularity contests. The way the game is governed and run, and who owns football clubs and where the money goes. Considering a few years ago, these big clubs were saying, "Oh, we could let the fans in free or very, very little. We don't need to charge massive ticket prices, but we do. It's called price gouging." And then it turned out they actually needed us as fans more than they claimed. Um, and there's been pressure to cap away ticket prices. But guess what? The EFL came in league games only, not FA Cup games. So when Middlesbrough play Man United, there is no cap on away ticket prices. Well, you say when a dodgy being, and I wouldn't say that I wouldn't say all football fans love it. The protests against the Glazers takeover of Man United all those years ago continue. Some of those angry fans set up their own football club. But I wouldn't say it's all fans are all in favour of takeovers. As a Blackburn fan with the Benkies, no Blackburn fan was in favour of that takeover ever. In my opinion, from what I remember, no fan of Blackburn Rovers. There were open letters signed. There was pressure put on the Premier League to stop the takeover. Obviously, the club needed to be sold for financial reasons to be as competitive as possible, and that hasn't actually been the case. We've got worse. A lot of debt has been racked up in the last 10 years. Technically, we're in breach of the 135% rule. And if that was to be actively enforced, 60% of the clubs would be docked points, and that's never going to happen. Ever. No, that was already a standalone club. It was FC United of Manchester was the set-up club. that was set up by a fans consortium, and then a lot of fans decided to turn their back on Old Trafford, and that was all those years ago. It was a protest club, and it's actually been quite successful in the non-league. No, the class of '92, so former Man United players went into an ownership group together, um, and bought Salford City, who were a non-league club at the time, as an investment. And there's obviously been documentaries on it, and TV programs and interviews done in regards to that. Um, so those fans that were angry at the Glazier takeover set up their own football club. Wimbledon fans, when they moved to Milton Keynes, reformed AFC Wimbledon in protest. So not um, yes, I do believe Salford may be moving to Sale's old stadium. They're not doing a stadium swap, I believe. They do need a bigger stadium, um, and they want to go up the divisions and progress. So I do believe there is plans to move to a new ground at some point in the next couple of years. I forget where FC United and Manchester play, so there could be a stadium move at some point, but there is a plan to move to better facilities in the near future. Um, but Salford City were already a very established team. And of course, you've got the rugby league team, the Salford Red Devils as well. So there is a lot of sport taking place in Salford, and there's limited facilities for three professional sports teams in the area. So facilities are that need to be appropriate for um, all clubs need to be considered. So there is that to consider. In regards to yeah, I think it is Salford FC swapping stadiums with the rugby league side. Salford Red Devils. It's just appropriate use of facilities. It it works better, I think, for both teams in that regard. Um, and is more appropriate for where both teams what they need as facilities. And of course, you've got Sale as well, who obviously play up north in Manchester. So you've got three professional sports teams and limited facilities in which to use. So and limited money as well. So they're not the wealthiest teams in the world in regards to the sports they play. There are far wealthier teams that they play against. Um, Yeah, rugby league, as I say, financial problems. I mean, I'm a Broncos fan, London Broncos, that is, when it comes to rugby league in the UK. They've had to go to part-time status. They've had stadium issues throughout their existence where they play their home games. They've had to constantly move around. So they've never had a home to call home. Um, and so, therefore, running costs is something, and rental costs is something. So they have to budget. So there are money issues there. And obviously, with the issues that's happening with rugby league and the money problems, trying to be more cost effective without affecting your end product is one thing. Is to try make sure the finances add up, and therefore you're more financially viable. And I think that's the case with the Red Devils. I don't know enough about the state of enough rugby league clubs in the Super League, League One, and Championship to really. I'll have to do a lot of research, but obviously we've had what happened with the Bradford Bulls and Widnes Vikings with various issues financially there in recent years. Um, I seem to remember about 4 or 5 years ago with the Widnes Vikings going into administration, they had issues with their stadium a few years back, and money problems. Bradford Bulls obviously is the famous example, and now the RFL has stepped in and now owns Odsal, and they've had to share with the Dewsbury Rams stadium share. So there are massive, obviously, financial issues within rugby league and then rugby union to a certain extent as well, outside of the Gallagher Premiership. So there are money problems with both codes. Um, and that's been replicated across the board in other countries as well. There are financial issues within rugby union. There are financial issues within rugby league. The rebranding of the Pro League into the United Rugby Championship doesn't solve the problems that um, uh, the Welsh game has. The South African teams joining South African teams also went tits up. Um, yeah, there is that as well. Rugby union has a bigger global imprint, has a better TV rights deal, uh, you know, better financial backing. But rugby union has its massive financial issues in the lower levels of the game. Uh, there's proposals to ring fence the Premiership, which I think harms the game at the lower levels, and but again, professionalism hasn't fully worked in the way it should have. There's a lot of issues at stake and in play for rugby union as well. Rugby league is in a terrible financial state. I've you know there's really poor governance of the game has contributed to the state that rugby league and rugby union is in. The Saracen salary cap scandal tells you all you need to know about the issues that rugby union faces, and I think there's going to be a knock-on impact because I think other teams like Bristol are clearly in breach of the salary cap. We're not naive to think they're not doing it. Saracens were the team to get caught, and that took about 4 years of press headlines, investigative journalism to finally get to where we were 2 years ago with Saracens and their situation. Um, and it, it highlights again weak governance in regards to how the salary cap has been enforced over many, many years. And that lies with the RFU and the Premiership. There's too many levels of governance. You should have a single governing body rather than multiple governing bodies, in my personal opinion. So it's like the Super League and RFL, um, the RFU and the Gallagher Premiership. Um, there's too many levels of bureaucracy, so therefore, these things happen. So the ex Chiefs have given into this woke cancel culture. Go woke, go broke. Yay! Uh, Racial appropriation is apparently the term. I mean, they've always been called the ex Chiefs, and it's only the last couple of years that people are suddenly getting a problem with that. It's just ridiculous. Um, but it's the current 21st century. Everyone's got to be offended by something. Some people lead some very, very, very depressing, closeted, boring lives. Um, but they were, sticking their heels in. I don't think we'll see what their new logo looks like. Yeah, the southwest was always a very strong, historically Celtic area, especially with Cornwall. I'm surprised they didn't go with that in the first place, but a bit of lazy branding there, possibly. Um, it's like the Washington Redskins, now called the Washington Football Team. Still haven't come up with a new name or a new logo. They're just Washington. Um, Over in the NFL, the Baltimore Orioles, changed their name. What was it? There was another one. There was another team that had to change their logo as well and their branding. Um, yeah, there's a lot of this cancel culture. It's ridiculous. Yeah, it's just pandering to. Yeah, well, it's the society we live in. It's not necessarily a good thing. You know, it's a topic for the other channel, really. But they're trying to ban To Kill a Mockingbird from schools in California. I mean, that's a Democrat state, so what do you expect, really? They go, it's meant to challenge you and say that this was what Mississippi and Alabama was like in the 19 when the book was written. It's meant to challenge you, and it raises the issues of what it's one of the best books of all time. And not that I'm a fan of To Kill a Mockingbird, but it's meant to challenge you as the reader into what you think should and shouldn't be acceptable. But now we're not allowed to do that because it might upset people. We've got to have the debate about what was right and wrong then and what's right and wrong now. Um, but yeah, teams rebranding. I mean, look at Leeds United's effort to rebrand their club logo. Jesus, that go down so well. So when watch which NHL team has surprised you? I think the Montreal Canadiens with how bad they've been by a country mile. The Montreal Canadiens being so absolutely woeful and just falling apart. And I think that's the team that surprised me the most this year is the Canadiens just being terrible. Um, Absolutely shocking season. Um, and question marks have to be asked about their obsession with having a French Canadian GM and coach. It's done nothing to help them. Um, and going from Stanley Cup finalists to the worst team in the league, I can't see it being a quick, easy fix for the Montreal Canadiens. I think, regardless that they're a Canadian team or not, and there's the debate about free agents would rather go to a US team, taxes and all that, and it, they are bad. Like, so bad. I haven't watched any NHL hockey since the restart of play just after Christmas, so I've taken a bit of a month out. Um, I could not watch every single NHL game because I would just couldn't cope with that. Um, uh, but yeah, no, the Montreal Canadiens and their position and being worst in the league and where they're sitting and the disaster of their season. You know, I wouldn't say the Penguins have surprised me. I think they're just a well-run organisation. They've got new ownership investment now from the Fenway Sports Group. Mario Lemieux and his consortium still have involvement. They're now minority stakeholders, so they've got more finances off the ice. And that is an organisation that has struggled financially since it joined the league back in 1967. They've had their struggles financially over their entire existence. There's been times when the Penguins have nearly gone bust. Um, for me, they're a well-run organisation, um, so that's not a surprise that they're well-run, good player development, good scouting. They've done some very good trade business, signed some very good free agents, Crosby and Malkin. Obviously, even if they're injured, they still have a massive input on the team. Um, they've got a good leadership core. I don't think that's surprising. Never discount them. They know how to win games. They know how to make playoffs. It's what they do in the playoffs is another thing, but they are a very well-run organisation, and on the ice, at least, by putting a team together. Off the ice, however, they have had their financial issues. They have had their arena issues. With the Fenway Sports Group coming in with their deep pockets, that gives them a lot of security going forward financially and investment-wise. But Fenway have said that they're not going to change the management structures with the GM and recruitment, scouting. Mario Lemieux still has some input on the day-to-day running of the team as well, and still has a minority stake within the team. Um, yeah, they did have a lot of injuries, but I think it's the structure they have in place. Mike Sullivan as coach, they've got some good coaching setup. They have some good structures in place. When players, their depth AHL or fringe players come in, they slot into the system. So yes, they had to go through a lot of injuries. Every team does, but I think their future post Crosby and Malkin is looking quite good. Um, Hackstall, yeah. Whether they would have had Boudreau or Gerard Gallant or whoever, they are an expansion team. They're a normal expansion team. They're not doing a Vegas. Vegas, obviously, Gerard Gallant got them to where they were. In regards to Dave Hagstall, yeah, I think a lot of people have pointed out he possibly is the problem. It's not the roster. The effort's there. The effort is there. They're not getting blown out in games, so the effort is there. Grubauer's not having his best season. So then you have to ask question marks of the goalkeeping, goaltending, coaching setup there. And Grubauer is a very, very good, uh, goalie. He's not a bad player. He's just having a bad season. Um, Guess what? The Kraken aren't the worst team, though. There are teams who were doing worse than them, and Montreal is the one that stands out as possibly the worst team this season. For me, I'm not surprised by the Kraken. The effort's there. The fans have bought in. Um, they are going to get better. I think the ownership will look at the coaching situation, and I think um, there may be a change behind the bench quite soon. I would have thought they're not going to make the playoffs. We know that. Unless they win every single game from here on out, they're not going to make the playoffs. But the expectation was obviously raised because of what happened with Vegas back in 2017, 2018, and their run to the Stanley Cup final in their first year. Um, but you compare them to all the other expansion teams since 1990, they're about par with some of them, better than others. So they're not the worst expansion team of all time. They're about an average expansion team. It's what you expect in a first year team when you're putting a team together from scratch. But coaching, if they had a different coach, yes, I do believe their record would be better. Um, that's not saying Hackstall's a terrible coach, but you can see issues with that team that another coach would fix quite quickly. Um, so we'll see what happens in the off season. We'll see what happens if there is a change behind the bench before the end of the season, after the trade deadline, perhaps. Um, we'll see how active they're going to be in the trade deadline. They do have a lot of cap space, and this is where I think Arizona and Seattle will be very, very crucial in the lead up to the trade deadline in a few weeks. I think they are going to be there's going to be some interesting player movement. I think, and I think with their cap space, with the cap not going up as much, um, I think Seattle could have a part to play in the trade deadline and player movement in the coming weeks. I find it interesting that they hired that Hackstall. There are other coaches out there who are available, and but at the same time, they are an expansion team. You can't. You have to look at the coaches that are available as well. So again, we'll just have to see what happens. We'll see if there's any changes behind the bench, what kind of trades happen, um, player movement. The effort's there with the players though. They're not getting outplayed; they're getting outcoached. That's my opinion on the Kraken. From when I've seen them play, they can play really well. They can beat better teams. They're getting outcoached. It's not like the players are not putting 110% in every night and wanting to impress and say, you know, I am better than what the team that let them go, allowed them to be exposed. Much like Vegas. But as standard expansion teams go, they're about average. I wouldn't say they're a terrible team, but coaching is I think the main issue there. Absolutely, coaching is the problem. But again, you can't believe they hired him. They did. But then you have to look at who was available coaching wise to take up the role. And of course, you've got to think you know, how long is Hackstall's contract? What were they offering in regards to deals to coaches on the table? Obviously, so there were a lot of coaches under contract, other teams, availability to get a coach in um, to take over a new team from scratch. Uh, only one expansion team in 20 odd years, Vegas. Of course, Gerard Gallant went to the Rangers, so it's trying to find that coach who's available and free to be named as a coach and who's willing to coach an expansion team, and not every coach is willing, let's say, to coach an expansion team. I mean, John Tortorella, imagine getting in behind the Kraken bench. Would their position be different? I would say yes. I would say they would be a better team than what they are. Um, but yeah, from the games that I've seen of the Kraken this season, yeah, they're not getting outplayed; they're getting outcoached. and the coaching deficiencies do affect their results. Um, Defensively, it's going forward. They're brilliant in attack. They can score goals. Defensively and in net is where the issues are, and I think there's a lack of confidence with Grubauer, and I think with a new goaltending coach, it's not working, and that's to do with Dave Hagstall. He would have had a big say on his coaching staff and his assistants, and defensively, they well, they've got some good players defensively. They're not working well as a unit, and that's not down to just we're cobbling a team together. That's down to coaching. That's not down to ability of the players. The players' ability is there. These are NHL level players, so that's more down to how the coaches are telling them how to play. They want to play a certain system. It's not suiting the players there, or it's not working as as a defensive system. Um, and you're not the first person to say Hackstall is the problem. A lot of people have said similar, who are more expert analysts in the sport. A lot of analysts are going, Hackstall is the problem, um, not the players. But I can see some players, yeah, free agency being interesting. I can see the off season being interesting. They do have the cap space, um, and the draft as well. Um, Again, I don't follow the AHL, but there are some coaches coaching in Europe and in the lower levels in the AHL and the ECHL. I think possibly deserved that shot as a first-time NHL coach. Um, I don't again know enough about the game in North America below the NHL and the affiliate leagues of the AHL and ECIHL, um, um, and even the SPHL and the university game as well. There are some coaches in the NCAA who I think could definitely make the jump over to the NHL as well. And Dave Haxtell, yeah, there have been question marks over his appointment and the style of play the team is playing and the defensive side of the game. But these questions were also back in Philadelphia with the Flyers. So this isn't a new criticism of Dave Haxtell. And the players not positively responding to that. It's not anything. Yeah, the thing is, they're not the worst expansion team of all time, and they're having a decent crack at their first season, and there's going to be more wins in there, and they're going to have a half decent record come the end. Even Arizona have got a half decent record now. There was a point at one point in the season where they're going to have a worse season than the 74 Capitals. Um, they're not going to break that record. Even Arizona are having a decent purple patch here or there. But yeah, no, there is no doubt. I mean, Rick Tocchet could have, you know, gone behind the bench there. But from everything I've seen from like TSN, Sportsnet, and the North American, like things like the Athletic and Barstool Sports and things like that, almost every journalist who covers the NHL has been very critical of the appointment of Hackstall as head coach over there. This is not just a fan's point of view saying, "Hang on a second, this is people who are experts in their field. These are ex-players and media reporters over in North America saying this guy is not working. It's a surprise move for an expansion team to have him named as coach, and it's not working. Absolutely, and you would think pick to win the Super Bowl. I'm indifferent. I'm not fussed this year. I don't have a pick this year. I haven't watched any NFL. I think for 2 years now. This is the second year I've watched no NFL. My interest in the NFL is gone now. So yeah, that interest is gone. I have no pick this year. Uh, I was starting to waver with the NFL before the pandemic. I was after the 2019 Super Bowl. I was like, this is the worst sport I've ever seen. I watched like 2, 3 minutes of the Super Bowl in 2019, and I haven't looked back in regards to not watching any NFL since. Really, Um, I'm not missing the NFL. If I'm honest. Um, yeah, it'd be nice to see like a Cincinnati or something, a new team get their hands on the Lombardi Trophy. I think the NFL has the same issues that Major League Baseball has, where like certain teams just, even though there's a salary cap in place, seem to constantly always be there, and some other smaller market teams or teams with less financial backing um, aren't as successful. Yeah, it would be nice to see, yeah, a new name on the Lombardi Trophy, and players who've not had an opportunity to play in the Super Bowl, get to play in the Super Bowl. In regards to you know the NFL itself, yeah, I've just over the last couple of years, I've slowly fallen out of love with the sport of American football, and it's not the only sport that my opinion has changed on. I've got oh, ow. In recent weeks I've got really back into watching GT racing, like the Mon series, uh, uh, and um, and I've really got back into, yeah, watching like the Le Mans series style endurance GT racing. I find that kind of fun, and I hadn't really got into that. I haven't really watched that a lot in recent years, and suddenly I'll be watching the 24 Hours of Daytona this weekend. So I'm going to have a very long weekend of bleary-eyed staying up. That's this weekend, uh, and the support series that go with that. And there's been some bad weather down in Daytona, so wet weather, a lot of heavy rain in Florida on Daytona Beach. So that's going to affect the 24 hours, and that will be very very interesting how that impacts the race. And yeah, I've got back into my motorsport that isn't F1. Um, but yeah, no, my opinion on the NFL, I've just lost passion for it, and I was never the most passionate fan to begin with, but I enjoyed it less and less as the years went by, and then yeah, I tuned out. I really tuned out in the 2019 Super Bowl. I was just falling asleep. So the last 2 years, I haven't watched it, and I haven't missed it either. That's not to say I won't do videos on the channel in regards to the NFL, and you know the direction the sport's taking, or career videos on players or coaches. But for me, it's not for me anymore. Um, and I watched every Super Bowl for like 17 years. I would stay up on a Sunday night in February and watch the Super Bowl, but no, it's not for me. Not for me anymore. And I have subscribers to this channel who are massive NBA fans, who are massive Major League Baseball fans, and I'm just like, well, I've got nothing against those sports. They're just sports that don't, um, how do I put it, invigorate me and make me wanna watch, and all that. And look what's happening with Major League Baseball. Um, this lockout, it could destroy the season, and I don't think baseball can afford to lose the 2022 season. Yeah, we'll see what happens with Major League Baseball because of the lockout. We'll see if talks resume. We'll see if the Players Association counter proposal gets the talks rolling again. They rejected the Major League Baseball proposal. The only bits that I think we can see any kind of compromise on would be free agency at 29 and a half years and some movement around there and expand the playoffs. They're the only areas that I think there's going to be any positive talks in regards to getting the talks going and any kind of compromise. The rest of what both sides are proposing, the other side is flatly rejecting. So we'll see. Always be like that with the NFL, Major League Baseball, and NBA with their shenanigans. There's the odd thing that happens every once in a while that keeps me interested for a bit, such as Shohei Ohtani for the Major League Baseball now. Yeah, but Major League Baseball are not even have a season, and I while the owners are saying, with their proposals, Players Association with theirs, they're playing a very risky game with the current, financial climate and the current economic climate that we find ourselves in because of the pandemic. Um, they're playing a very risky game with this lockout, very risky game, and we'll see how it affects this year and how long it lasts. But from every report I'm reading, the only proposals that both sides are willing to discuss is an expansion of the playoffs and free agency and arbitration status when it comes to how long you have to play. And they both are saying 29 and a half years you can hit free agency. There's a bit of leeway on that proposal from both sides and expand the playoffs. That's the only proposals I can see that both sides have put forward where there's room for compromise and room for um, discussion. Every other proposal has been rejected by either side. So I can see that lockout lasting a very, very long time and not getting resolved anytime soon, which is not a good thing, basically. Not in the slightest. So we'll see what happens. We'll see how it plays out. But from my standpoint and my point of view, it's there's not a lot of positivity there. There's not a lot of I mean, you got to give a little to gain a lot, in my opinion. And there's no drive to compromise. And the longer this goes on, the more damaging it becomes for Major League Baseball. And going back, 2020, the resumption of play talks, we nearly had a lockout then, or a strike then. It came down to the wire in getting any kind of play done in 2020 and even play in 2021. They've been kicking the problem as like in the proverbial can down the road since 1995. It's been a sticking plaster over sticking plaster over sticking plaster. And bearing in mind, in that period, we've had the steroid scandal, we've had the sign stealing scandal. So there's been on and off field issues that involve high profile players that have been embarrassing for the league, that have been scandalous, that have been damaging for the reputation of Major League Baseball. And, fast forward 2022, there's a lockout. I'm just surprised we have gone as long as we have with Major League Baseball without one or without a player strike. I'm surprised we have reached this point where we haven't had labour unrest sooner. How popular is lacrosse in Europe? When I was at school, many years ago now. Yes, I can say that. I'm 32 now. When I was at school, the girls had a lacrosse program. I wouldn't say it's overly. I'm going to move my laptop because my back is hurting. I've got a bit of a bad back this week. I'm just going to make myself comfortable. That's better. I've just got to remember that my side light is going to affect the screen, so I've just got to get more comfortable. How popular is lacrosse in Europe? I know it's played in university and in public school. When I say public school, I mean private education. There is lacrosse programs. It's not. I wouldn't say it's overly overly popular. There isn't a professional setup. It is played in there is play in universities, um, but I don't think it is as popular as it could be. I don't know of any players or any teams that play um, in any league. I've been trying to get back into it with watching the National Lacrosse League. Was a big fan of it in the past. I don't know if that's because Lacrosse League with the skill level, though. I know there's a Premier League for it. I do know there is obviously the National Lacrosse League in the US and Canada, and it has a decent uh, following. Um, but there's no real. I don't know how popular it is. From my experience, it's a very niche sport. And in the UK, at least, if you think of it this way, it doesn't matter if you're in state or private education. The sports that get played are football, soccer to North Americans, rugby union, rugby league, field hockey, and cricket. They are your compulsory sports. Now, you might have a choice between playing rugby, one of the rugby codes, and field hockey. But other than that, that's basically your sports at school. Any other sport that you choose to play is optional and very, very niche in that regard. When it comes to the compulsory sports, and then possible selection of a secondary sport on top of that, um, should you, as the student, want to put down as an optional secondary sport. Um, so in that regard, uh, from my personal experience and my friends' experience, it wasn't really a sport that had a lot of interest. Now, I know it is played in private school, but I know it's also not the most popular sport. Also in private school, it's mostly private education and university. It's played in England that I know of, or the UK. Um, but I don't know how popular it is post education, should I say, in let's say grassroots, uh, recreational sport. I've seen some snippets of the NCAA and the National Lacrosse League on the internet, so I know it's more popular in North America. Um, but as I say, it doesn't seem to have the same popularity or interest over here in Europe. I can't speak for you know the rest of the continent um, in regards to it being played at a decent level. It'll be interesting to see the nationalities of some of the players who are overseas who play in the National Lacrosse League in the US and Canada, like where the players are from. If there are any overseas players playing within the system in the US and Canada, but I don't think it's overly popular in Europe. It's seen as an upper class sport in Europe as well, and very 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 niche. I would say. I don't think it has the same kind of participation as basketball or even ice hockey um, do. And ice hockey is very very popular in Europe. I think for head of population and lacrosse is the only sport where there's a Native American national. Uh, yeah, I mean lacrosse is related to ice hockey and hurling. That's where it develops from, and that's what the sports it's linked to. Now, obviously, hurling in Ireland is an amateur sport, Gaelic Amateur Association, and that gets national TV coverage in Ireland. There's a very good TV deal. So I don't know how long Gaelic football and hurling stay amateur. Obviously, there's the cultural reasons why and the social reasons why they're amateur sports. They're pretty much professional in all but name at this point. But they have a very strong TV agreement over in Ireland. They get national TV coverage. Um, in regards to lacrosse, I don't know how popular it is. I don't know any people who play it. So you've got floor hockey as well. You've got roller hockey, which is reasonably popular. But I've not come across any lacrosse teams since leaving school. Um, but I that is an interesting question. I think I'm a bit stumped there. I'm going to have to look into the popularity of. I'm actually going to look into the popularity of lacrosse right now. Let's have a look. What we got? What we got? What we got? Oh, it's my cousin's birthday today. I'll give her a message. Completely forgot. Let's have a look at. Let's have a look at the popularity of lacrosse in Europe because that's now really interested me. Let's have a look. Let's have a look. Stupid thing. Let's have a look at the popularity of lacrosse in Europe. Let's have a look. Here we go. EuropeanLacrosse.org. So there is actually a website. Here we go. Let's have a look. So you asked about the popularity of lacrosse in Europe. A short history of lacrosse in Europe. Um, Lacrosse is one of the oldest games in the world. It did evolve in North America with the Native American tribes. Um, and references were made to the native game as early as 1636 in Canada. Um, um, da, 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 da. So it has its history in the North American native population. So they were playing it back then. Da, da, da. 1867 was the Lacrosse Association was formed in the Cathedral Hotel, St Paul's Churchyard, on the 15th of January 1868. Four clubs were formed um, in the 1867-68 season, but the game did not succeed in gaining a foothold until a guy called George Beers bought two teams in 1876. Um, da, 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 da. Yeah, it was the success of it was played again by the upper classes. So it's a very, you know, field lacrosse didn't really start till 1988. Um, da, 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 da. It's a very long article. It's really boring. Apparently, it's very popular in the Czech Republic and Slovak Republic. So there you go. 1995, on the 3rd of July, the European Lacrosse Federation was inaugurated. So you had the Czech Republic, Scotland, England, Sweden, Germany, and Wales as they joined. At the time of this article in 2011, there are a number of other European countries where there are developing teams: Serbia, Turkey, Croatia, Ukraine, and Russia, who want to join the Lacrosse Federation of Europe. Um, Basically, not very popular is the answer. Um, let's have a look at what else they're saying about lacrosse. Lacrosse is a team sport played with a lacrosse stick and lacrosse ball. The game was modified by Europeans to reduce the violence. we Europeans modified the game to reduce the violence to create its current collegiate and professional form. So it's been now lacrosse has been played at the Olympics in 1904 and 1908, and demonstrated in 28, 32, and 48. And the World Game of the women's field lacrosse was in 2017. And lacrosse in the United States, you've got collegiate, and you've got men's and women's. Professional, the Major Lacrosse League is a semi-professional league started in 2001 with 6 teams in the northeastern United States. The league currently has 9 teams in the eastern United States, and Denver playing a 14-game season from April to August. They're based on the NCAA men's rules, with several exceptions. Major League Lacrosse range from small stadiums with under 10,000 capacity to an NFL stadium. They play at the Broncos Stadium in Denver. The average attendance is 4,000 per game. Denver averages 10,000 per game. Rookie salary is 7,000 per season. Most players make between 10 and 20,000 per season. Therefore, players have other jobs, non-lacrosse related. The National Lacrosse League is the men's semi-pro box lacrosse league. 15 teams, 10 in the US, 5 in Canada, 18-game regular season, December to April. Games are played on weekends. Games are played on ice rinks with artificial turf covering the ice. So NHL arenas seating 19,000 to smaller arenas under 10,000 capacity. The average attendance range from 3,200 per game in Vancouver to 15,000 in Buffalo. Average 9,500 per game. Canadians and Native Americans make up 90% of the players. It started in '87. The Premier Lacrosse League in 2018. The Premier Lacrosse League was formed, which just travels around the US. With the Women's Lacrosse League and the Women's Professional Lacrosse League. Yeah, we did replace the head with a ball. Yes. But no, so outside of the US and Canada, very few nations play it. There's your answer on that one. It's not that popular. And it is seen as an upper class sport. So it's a very niche sport, not a lot of players. And it appears to be the same in the US and Canada. There's not a lot of money in the sport. There is an NCAA program. Could there be potential for growth? Absolutely. But looking at that, and there's the short history of the organised game. You know, it's not overly popular. The fact that the Czechs decided to take it up in the 80s, I find very interesting. But yeah, it's not. People obviously watch the game because they are playing in NHL, sized arenas and at the Denver Broncos Stadium. So people are going to watch games, but not in the numbers that you would expect. It's a very niche sport. It's a very, very, very niche sport, and of course you've got to pay for the equipment as well. Like ice hockey, it's an expensive sport to play. So, and when you're competing against more established, organised, better financed sports, it's going to be difficult to make that breakthrough. So, but yeah, very, very niche sport and a low uptake of players, so a very limited player base. But the fact that most of the players are Canadian or Native American speaks volumes to about the sport and its heritage. But yeah, so we'll see what happens with the growth of lacrosse. I do believe there would obviously be potential for it to become a bigger sport, but it has to break down the barriers of being seen to be a very niche, wealthy person sport. there's a lot of barriers in the way in regards to finances, participation, and exposure as well. Not a lot of people play it. There's not a lot of people playing it. Um, that in itself, obviously, uh, makes it difficult to grow. Yeah, I think hurling, the Irish equivalent, I would say, and field hockey, and I think ice hockey as well. Um, that um, uh, is another hurdle in the way as well. Um, let's have a look at some of the sports stories. So yeah, there's two of the four quarter-final ties to be shown of the Africa Cup of Nations. Um, Gambia are taking on Cameroon at 4 o'clock our time, so about 6 hours of time, and Senegal are playing Equatorial Guinea at 7 o'clock tomorrow, live on the other TV. On TV, Burkina Faso take on Tunisia at 7 o'clock Saturday, so this evening, and Egypt face each other tomorrow. And of course, both semi-finals and the final will be broadcast live as well. So we've got some interesting football coming up in the next week with the Africa Cup of Nations. So there could be some interesting knockout football. Um, so yeah, I think the Gambia Cameroon is going to be an interesting one. Potential banana skin there. Um, Ashley Barty has won the Women's Australian Open. Um, First Australian to win the Women's Singles Championship in 44 years. Breaking news. At home as well. So she's claimed three of the four majors. Uh, Lampard has been offered the Everton job. So he's in talks. Um, Frank Lampard is in talks to be the replacement for Rafa Benitez at Everton. Um, so we'll see what happens there. And of course, Wayne Rooney rejecting the Everton job as well. Is quite interesting. What else? The Women's FA Cup, what's looked out for in the fourth round this weekend? The Women's FA Cup returns this weekend with the Women's Super League Giants on the fray as part of the 16 fourth round ties. Da, 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 da. Some upsets. Protests. Here we go. Women's teams are fighting for less than 2% of the prize fund awards for the men's side. There, yeah, so there's been uh, complaints about the prize money they receive. Um, there's an article here about Don Revie. About the fact it banned him for 10 years from English football in the late 70s, following him deciding to go work overseas after his 77 move overseas, and they banned him for 10 years. And he never works in England ever again. Oh, interesting. I don't think Benitez has become a bad manager overnight. I think it's the situation. It's the situation. Everton. Oh wait, I've got to go. Hang on 1 second. Hello. 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 Fuck's sake, then woman. So, oh, Fucking hell. Hello. Right, I spoke to Rob last night. Okay, I'm £281 and 3 pence short of my rent. He's going to lend me 200 quid. So I'm 81, just over £81 short. Well, I also need to buy food next week as well. So if you could lend me 100 quid, I can pay my rent on time, and I get obviously all my holiday pay plus my last week in lieu pay, and I can pay you back. Otherwise, I can't pay my rent on time again. I don't want to have another late payment. Well, I've got to pay Rob back 200 quid next Friday, and of course that goes on top to what I already owe you because I start full time on Tuesday, going through, and I get paid again at the end of the month. I know, I know. Let's talk about it later. I've all right, and I can talk to Rob a bit later because he's asleep right now. And I said I would phone him at lunchtime. So all right, all right. I understand. I understand. I'm trying to get myself out of my overdraft. But I've had a shitty 6 months. I'm not trying to be difficult. I've just not had the best of times lately. Um, yeah, right. Yeah, yeah. Leave, leave him to it. We'll talk later this afternoon. Leave him to it. I'll phone me back when you've walked the dogs. I'm assuming. Phone me back about 3 o'clock, and then we can talk later. All right. All right. Bye, bye. Bye. Sorry about that. I had my mum on the phone. Has Rafa Benitez become a bad manager? No, I think the Everton situation is bad issues within the structures of the club. Um, there's obviously problems at Everton that are long-standing. There's a reason why Everton have not won any silverware since 1995, and there's a reason why they haven't been close to silverware since David Moyes left. Um, I don't think Rafa Benitez has become a bad manager. It doesn't happen overnight. It's wrong. It's like the same with Nuno going to Tottenham. He had a great record at Wolves. Made the team a lot better while he was at Wolves. Um, and yeah, no, I don't think Benitez is a bad manager. You don't win the silverware he's won. Look what he did with Newcastle with no budget. So, and there was issues at Newcastle. Let's be clear on that. Same with Steve Bruce at Newcastle. Similar league finishing position with no investment. Already under Eddie Howe, the amount of investment the new ownership has spent is more than the last 5 years combined between those two managers at Newcastle. In regards to Benitez, no, he hasn't become a bad manager. I think the situation at Everton is bad club structures, bad ownership, and what else is there to say? I mean, Bill Kenwright obviously sold his stake in the club after Moyes, I believe, departed from Man United. And the fact that Wayne Rooney, club legend, remember that, two spells at the club. Obviously, made his name at the club before going to Man United. Very talented young manager. He's proving it at Derby County with all the issues that Derby County are facing. Um, he's turned down the lot, and Derby County are screaming out for cash. If Everton goes to him and approach Derby County, that could solve a lot of their financial problems by making sure they have enough money to survive the season. I think Wayne Rooney's goal is to keep Derby up this season. And really show that he's up for the fight for management. Same with Frank Lampard at Derby. He did an amazing job at Derby. Um, he goes to Chelsea, and obviously with the transfer embargo Chelsea had due to their breach of youth player transfer policy, did a very very good job at Chelsea, in my opinion. Just couldn't take the step from fifth to doing well in Europe and winning silverware. So these are young talented managers that they've been linked with. Does Benitez become a bad man? No, Benitez is not a bad manager. The structures at Everton, it's bad ownership, bad off-field management, and the chopping and changing I know there's issues with the transfer policy and scouting and player retention. They've lost so many good young players to other clubs. So many talented players have come through Everton. The North West as a region is a football production line. It's not just Liverpool or Man United, with the class of '92 and the constant production line that Liverpool have had. Every club in the Northwest, like Preston, Blackburn, even Burnley, have got a good youth system. Man City, Man United, Everton, Liverpool, Tranmere, Wigan, Bolton. The history that these clubs have within the game and the production line of talent they have within the game as well. It is a talent hotbed in the Northwest. It's a sporting hotbed, the Northwest. You've got rugby league, rugby union, cricket, football. They're all ice hockey. They're all producing talented athletes who go on to be professional sports stars. They're losing out now in the youth development category because some of their best young talent gets snapped up by other clubs. Ross Barkley, I think, is a prime example. I think he's obviously at Chelsea now. John Stones, he's obviously now at Man City. Um, they've had some great players wear you know the jersey. They're the older of the two clubs in Liverpool as well. They originally owned Anfield and sold that to Liverpool, ironically. So they are an integral part of the early stages of the founding of the Football League and the structures that is now the Football League and the Premier League. Um, Great success, great history. But currently, under Morshi and Uzumov, really shocking ownership that should never have been allowed anywhere near a football club. Um, they have spent a lot of money, misspent a lot of money in the transfer market. But they've had some great players play for them. And obviously, if they won the FA Cup final against Chelsea under David Moyes, how different would the story have been? That's a what if. But the last time they won a trophy was 1995. That's 27 years ago this May. That's 27 years without silverware. That's not good enough. How can that be? They want to move to a new stadium. Um, I don't know where they get where the finance for that's coming from because there are question marks over the financial dealings of the ownership group. Um, and I don't think Benitez is a bad manager. No, not at all. Um, the fact they moved, and what is interesting is Chelsea, Liverpool, Newcastle. Even at Newcastle, his win percentage was 10 percentage points higher than Everton. Yes, he had more seasons in charge, a longer spell. He got a bigger data range to look at. Liverpool and Chelsea, well over 50%. Newcastle, well over 40%. Everton, mid 30s. So you have that to bear in mind as well. Um, the the there's a lot of issues going on at Everton, and you have to look behind the scenes. And you can say, well, Chelsea change manager quite regularly. Yes, they have the right structures behind the scenes, so it doesn't matter who comes in. The support structures are in place to be successful. Um, they were successful before Abramovich. They've had money issues, but the structures at Chelsea behind the scenes in player recruitment, scouting, the support staff for the manager, whatever manager and his assistants come in is there. Better training facilities, um, you know, so they can swap manager in and out. But the structures are good there, and Benitez had success there. Even in his short time at Chelsea, he had success with Chelsea in a short period of time. Everton, it never really got going, and that is a problem. But they were underperforming. Ancelotti shows how good Ancelotti was with his season in charge, where he got to eighth. But I think If Ancelotti was truly happy at Everton, he would have stuck to the plan and would still be there. He's not. And then you look at what's gone before. You had Martinez, didn't work. He's won silver, the FA Cup with Wigan. Didn't work. Ronald Koeman has won silver, didn't work. Disastrous with Ronald Koeman and what happened with Koeman. Then the replacement saga to get David Unsworth as caretaker. Then Big Sam comes in. Then Silva, that didn't work. Now you have Ancelotti coming. That doesn't work. Then you get Benitez. That doesn't work. Then you're now approaching Lampard. It's not guaranteed he's going to get the job. There's a couple of others, in the background. Do you give it to Ferguson, Duncan Ferguson, because he's put forward his name into the hat. He's been at the club for forever. This Portuguese manager who I don't know a lot about. They're going with Lampard, but is that the right decision? He's only got 3 years of managerial experience, or 3 seasons of managerial experience. He's been out of work a year. They've been turned down by Wayne Rooney at Derby. So, yeah, this is a problem. And bearing in mind, they've got to compete with Man United for the manager's signature, because Man United have obviously given themselves, Ranić's going to be interim until the end of the season. We're going to give ourselves a bit more time to appoint a successor. Watford, very quick. Ranieri out, Hodgson in. We're quick. Dean Smith, Leeds Villa goes to Norwich, quick. Gerrard, quick replacement at Villa. So they missed out on getting Steven Gerrard, a local lad. Even though he obviously is a Liverpool legend, he's a local lad to Merseyside, would understand the significance of the club. Missed out on him. They've missed out on Rooney, ex-player and current Derby manager. They're going after Lampard. So they're going for this. Is Frank Lampard going to be the fix? Lampard is a good, young, talented manager who's not long out of playing and would have played possibly with for and against some of the lads he'll be coaching. He would have come across some of the lads on the playing field. There is no doubt on that. However, again, he's very early in his managerial career. He's never been at a club threatened by relegation in these 3 seasons, which is a different style of management you've got to put in there. There's 2 days left of the transfer window at this point. How's it going to play out? How is it going to play out? What teams do you expect to be relegated, promoted? Look, I'm a Blackburn fan, so I'm going to be a little bit biased with the promotion charge that we've got going. Bournemouth have lost a couple in a row, so we are now ahead of Bournemouth. So it's basically as you were before Christmas, really, except Fulham and Bournemouth have swapped places, really. But Fulham, I think, it's their league title to lose in the Championship. But we don't have all the cup fixtures. Now, if they beat Man City, they then get that fixture congestion with the FA Cup. As far as they go in the FA Cup, that's extra games to get played. We are clear in second by 3 points, and we have a better goal difference than QPR and West Brom, those teams chasing for automatic promotion. That's a difficult one. I think Bournemouth last season sort of imploded from a strong position. I think they're doing it again. I'm hoping Blackburn get the second automatic promotion space. QPR, I think, could be dangerous in the playoffs. Do not discount QPR. And we have overcome the curse of the televised game. We don't do well on Sky TV. We tend to lose those games. We lost that game against Hull. We won our last game on Sky TV. So I'm not so keen on the curse of Sky TV. QPR have picked up their form. Again, they're in the FA Cup 4th round as well. So we are hoping, as a Blackburn fan, I'm hoping that the cup distractions for some of these teams, if they go and have these extra fixtures, could help us a little bit. But we're playing well. Fulham are playing well. Bournemouth have had a bit of a wobble. They've slipped back. They've gone from 1st to 3rd. And that's a big point swing as well that Fulham have had. Fulham have had a massive point swing. We've stayed steady and Bournemouth have slipped. QPR and West Brom have closed the gap. So that's going to be a very, very tight, congested playoff place battle, I think. I think we can now get enough of a gap above the chasing pack. And of course, these teams below us and above us have got FA Cup on their minds. So FA Cup distraction could benefit us in the Championship promotion race. In regards to relegation from the Premier League, I think Burnley are done even with their games in hand. I just don't think that some of their best players are being sold. I think Burnley are done this season. As a Blackburn fan, there's a little bit of smugness on my face, but I would actually like to see Blackburn Burnley be a regular league fixture again. It hasn't been for a long time. That would be kind of nice and tasty. It's one of the oldest rivalries in English football. It would be nice to see a Blackburn Burnley derby match again, but the way it's looking, Burnley have never got going this season. Yes, they got games in hand. That could prove crucial, but then that could also prove crucial in a negative way where they just can't play them all those games. That's going to be chronic every 3 days. Watford are in trouble, deep trouble, even with Roy Hodgson. This is a guy who basically said he retired from football management. He's over 70 years old. Does he really have it in him to fix the problems? I think he's done at the end of the season. The final relegation spot, I think Norwich and Newcastle can get out of it. I honestly believe that. I think Everton and Leeds are very likely to get sucked in. I think the way Everton are playing right now, I think they are going down. Even if Lampard gets a point, I can see Everton, they're slipping down. They're in trouble. They're in trouble. And the length of time they're taking to get a new manager appointed. Watford were quick with the Ranieri situation. Whatever you make of that, they're on their third manager this season. They have been very, very quick in naming replacements. Norwich again with Dean Smith, very, very quick. Aston Villa with Gerrard, very, very quick. I wonder what is the most London clubs in the Premier League at one time. That is a good one. That's a good one because Wimbledon, Charlton, QPR, they've all been in the Premier League at one point, and that's an interesting one. I don't think all the London clubs that are professional be in the top division at the same time. If that were the case, you'll only have about, I think, 4 or 5 clubs outside of London in the Premier League. Should that be the case? So I don't know what it is. I know it's in single figures. It's not double figures. It is single figures. I think it's about 8 or 9. It's about half the league at one point was London based. I'm going to have to check that season on season to have a look at the average trend of clubs from London. But at the moment, yeah, Fulham. I forgot Fulham had been in the Premier League as well at one point. This is going to be interesting. I'm going to have to look at that. The maximum number of London clubs. Don't you look at it? I have to research that. That's a little bit of homework for me over the next few days. I honestly don't know the answer to that. Quite frankly, if I'm being brutally honest, couldn't tell you the answer to it. But that is definitely something to question because you look at it. So let's have a look at this. Break down the London clubs that play professionally, at least. Okay, professionally, and I don't class Barnet as a London club. You could end up with more than that. So let's go through this. You've got Arsenal, Tottenham, Brentford, Fulham, Chelsea. That's 5 already. Charlton, Crystal Palace, Millwall, West Ham. That's 9. Leyton Orient, that's 10. Oh God, so that's 10. I think I am missing one somewhere. Let's try that again. So Arsenal, Tottenham, Brentford, Chelsea, Fulham. That's 5. Crystal Palace, Millwall, West Ham, Leyton Orient, Charlton. 10. Yeah, you could end up with half the Premier League basically being London clubs. And if you count Barnet, that's 11. That are professional. No, Watford, Hertfordshire. It's outside Greater London. If it's outside Greater London, AFC Wimbledon, that's 12. I've got to do this again now. Right, okay. Let me start this again. Arsenal, Tottenham, Brentford, Chelsea, Fulham, QPR, Wimbledon, Crystal Palace, Millwall, West Ham, Leyton Orient. Boreham Wood is technically outside London. Now I've got to start again now. Right, okay. Arsenal, Tottenham, Brentford, Fulham, Chelsea, 5. QPR, 6. Remember that person. AFC Wimbledon, 7. Millwall, Crystal Palace, West Ham, 10. Leyton Orient's 11. QPR is 12. Barnet is 13. Oh, shit. This is getting ridiculous now. Charlton Athletic. There's about 12, 13, 14 clubs in London alone. They could have their own separate league. They really could have their own separate league. I think I'm missing one out. I know I am. Arsenal, Tottenham, Brentford, Fulham, Chelsea. That's 5. QPR is 6. Covered North and West London there. AFC Wimbledon 7. South West London covered. Millwall, Crystal Palace, Charlton, West Ham, Leyton Orient, Dagenham and Redbridge. There you go. There's another one. I've got to start again. I'm going to have to. We're looking at about 15 clubs at this point. And if you count the Metropolitan Police, they actually have a professional team with professional players. The Met. There is Barnet. Barnet's actually inside Greater London. So, yeah, Barnet. Oh, God. How could I forget Dagenham and Redbridge? Yeah, you're looking at about 16 clubs. You could have your own professional league in London alone. And I don't count Watford as a London team because they're in Hertfordshire. Hayes has got a side. Hayes has got a non-league side. That's professional. That's in the National League South, I believe, or National League. Hayes. That's another one. There's more than that. I think there's about 20 clubs that play semi-pro professional football in London alone at a decent enough level to say you could have your own league. And yeah, you could say Boreham Wood is actually a London team. I think if they're inside Greater London, I would say yes. If they're not inside Greater London, no. Do I see Chelsea winning something this season? FA Cup, Champions League. With their recent form, no. They're going to have to put a performance in the FA Cup fourth round for me to say okay, they could win the FA Cup. Their league form lately has been troubling. And while they're still in the League Cup as well, they're in the League Cup final. They didn't look overly dominant. So we'll have to see. They could still win the League Cup, absolutely. But right now, we're trying to work out how many London clubs there are that play professional football, and there's quite a few more than I thought. But no, I think the way Chelsea are playing right now, their league form is concerning. Yes, they had that very good win over Chesterfield in the third round, but their league form is not great, not great at all. So it's put your hands in the air kind of moment, kind of thing. But there we go. So yeah, Chelsea's form lately has been a little bit concerning. In all honesty, has been concerning. I don't know. Again, their form recently hasn't been great. It's my personal opinion, and Liverpool as well. Their form's been a little bit better, and so it'll be interesting to see how Chelsea. I mean, Chelsea lost in the FA Cup final last year to Leicester, so again, well, they won the Champions League final last year. They lost the FA Cup final, and that was 2 finals in the space of a week. In regards to the League Cup, it's not Man City, so that's a good thing, I suppose. I think Liverpool are favourites going into that League Cup final, in my opinion. But again, the League Cup final is a month or so away. A lot can happen in that time. What Chelsea have got to look to now is their next league game and their next cup game, and when the Champions League knockout stages resume as well, they've got to take it a game at a time. They're not going to win the league. They're in the hunt for 3 cup trophies, and it is doable. But their current form, I'm not sold on their current form um, right now. I have some concerns about Chelsea's form. Liverpool are in slightly better form, and Klopp versus Tuchel. Yeah, okay, they both come from the same school of coaching. They both won trophies with Borussia Dortmund, uh, but Klopp has got more success um, than Tuchel, I think. So we'll see what happens. I think going forwards, but I think Liverpool are favourites that League Cup final. At the same time, you know, the FA Cup could kickstart Chelsea with a little bit of momentum, but we'll see. But they are in the running for three trophies. So same with Liverpool. Liverpool are in the running for 3 trophies as well. But Liverpool fans would see just being in contention for trophies and fighting for trophies as a successful season. Chelsea, um, even when you win trophies, the manager's position is not secure. I think Klopp is in a more secure position with Liverpool than Tuchel is at Chelsea as well. I think that um, has a bearing. Yes, Liverpool have been looking great themselves. They are missing key players with injury and the Africa Cup of Nations. Difference is the backing that the board is giving the manager. So Klopp's position is secure. There is no threat for Klopp's job. Tuchel, however, there's already been reports coming out of Chelsea in the media that there's pressure building on Tuchel with the ownership. And I was surprised, that he's stuck around as long as he has. He's a very prickly character, and he has breakdowns in relationships with key people. We had a breakdown at PSG with the relationship with Leonardo, and there was a breakdown in relationship between the board at Dortmund and himself. And of course, he's one of those managers that can be a little bit of a prickly character, difficult to get on with, um, and that may be ringing true at Chelsea as well. But yeah, Liverpool aren't looking great either, but they're winning games, whereas Chelsea have been dropping points further behind in the league table hunt. In the league hunt. And yeah, I think there is I mean, Liverpool are having a bit of a down season. Um, However, they're still in the competition for 3 trophies as well. So Liverpool could win 3 cup competitions themselves and have a cup treble this season without winning the league. That would be an amazing return on the investment, should I say? Uh, if Tuchel was to win the League Cup and the FA Cup, or the league, or the FA Cup and the Champions League, is his job secure though? Because we've seen with previous managers, you can get success to Chelsea and still lose your job. There's a lack of patience at Chelsea with the Abramovich ownership. Um, um, the new Chelsea manager, should they target Zinedine Zidane? It's an interesting one. But again, it's the managerial turnaround at Chelsea. That's the problem. Um, Zidane, we'll see where he ends up in management again. In my personal opinion, I think his experience at Real Madrid might have. I don't know. I wouldn't say Tuchel's the best manager since Mourinho and Ancelotti. I think Conte, I think possibly was the best manager in recent times at Chelsea. But it's not to do with the results on the field. It's to do what happens off the field with Tuchel, I think. Um, and the other thing is, you look at the length of time a manager that sticks around at Chelsea, they're not there very long. Um, the, the managerial turnaround at Chelsea is part of the trademark of Chelsea Football Club. Um, if you know what I mean, it's part of the fabric of the club. The manager it's the Chelsea style. How long that is sustainable in the long term is something else. But Chelsea are in the running for 3 trophies this season, as things stand. Let's see what happens at the end of the season. If they win no trophies at the end of the season from the position they're in, then I think Tuchel is done at Chelsea. Um, Whereas with Liverpool, with Klopp, there's no pressure on his job as things stand. So there's the difference. in my opinion. I don't see Zidane going to Chelsea at all. Um, I've not seen that film at all. I don't watch films like that. They're normally badly acted and uh, badly produced. No, I do think they were just as competitive back then. They both had Klopp and Guardiola in charge a couple of years ago. I think Conte is a good manager. I think it's not working at Spurs. That's clear to see. Again, structures off the field are a problem at Spurs, and we can debate that. Um, it's the clubs that are more successful tend to have the better structures off the field. Um, so if there is a managerial change, it shouldn't matter because the scouting is still the same. The youth development system is in place. The transfer policy is already in place. It's successful, and the manager slots in, brings his team in, but is working with a very well established, successful, simple, streamlined structure behind the scenes, regardless of how often the manager changes, and it works on the field. What you have with Everton and what you have with some other clubs is some really poor management behind the scenes, and therefore it affects the on-field performance as well. Man United and Everton are the prime examples right now of poor off-field structure, and therefore the lack of results on the field. I don't think Mourinho goes back into the Premier League at this point. I don't know how much longer he lasts at Roma either, with how it's going this season. Yeah. Um, I'm not so sure Mourinho is going to come back to the Premier League anytime soon. But then again, you never know with Jose Mourinho. He might decide to give it a third time, third's the charm, fourth time, you know, or fifth time even. He's twice at Chelsea, once at Tottenham, once back. I wouldn't possibly. We'll see what happens with Eddie Howe. If Eddie Howe can keep the team up, then that's a different question. It changes the dynamic. Um, so we'll see what happens with Newcastle, and we'll see what happens in the summer. Um, I think Eddie Howe will be given another full season. We'll see what happens with Mourinho and Roma. It's not going so well at Roma with Mourinho. It's gone a bit squiff, and he's under a lot of pressure at Roma to get um, things changed quickly. Um, so we'll see what happens in regards to the Mourinho question and where he ends up in the future, and how long he stays in management. How long does Mourinho stay in football management? It's the same with any manager. I'm surprised Roy Hodgson has come out of retirement to take on the Watford job. If I'm being brutally honest. Oh yes, no. Mourinho at PSG. Imagine that going wrong. I think we'll see what happens with Mourinho. Everyone's got their opinion on where he should go and who he should manage, and then you know where he'll end up. Um, we'll see what happens with the Roma situation. If I'm being honest. Um, it's not going great at Roma. So we'll see what happens. And Mourinho is one of those managers who is difficult. He's a difficult. He's a character. Um, and so yeah, he might go into the full time media role with either Portuguese or English television or something like that. I could see him doing that. Um, but his relationship with the media, though, is what is interesting. His relationship with the media over many years. So he's had rather well known feuds with some journalists. Imagine him working with those same journalists he's feuded with over the last 30 years. That could be good TV actually. But I can see him ending up working with Portuguese TV or English TV at some point. Um, but again, we'll see what happens with Mourinho and where his managerial path takes him. But there's other, you know, it's the question is who's going to be the next Man United manager. Quite frankly, that's the next question on everyone. And Everton have approached Lampard, and we'll see if that gets confirmed this weekend or not. and also the Man United vacancy in the next 4 months, who they decide to name. If they name a manager now for next season, that could be interesting. We'll have to see how the Man United managerial vacancy plays out and where they go from here. Um, have they started to turn a corner with Ranić? It's an open-ended question there. Um, but we'll see what happens with a lot of clubs, to be fair. And yeah, we'll see the direction that certain teams decide to take, quite honestly. Right, I'm going to leave that there. Thank you very much, obviously, for all your questions. I've got a lot of stuff to sort out this afternoon. There will also be a live stream tomorrow before the Africa Cup of Nations quarter final that I'll be watching. So thank you very much, obviously, for all your questions. I really appreciate it, and I will see you all very soon. Final question: what do I like better, Sky Sports or ESPN? Neither. I don't watch either. There you go. And I'm not sure about Pochettino and what happens with him either, because there's debate whether he'll stick or twist at PSG. But thank you very much for all your questions, and of course, I'll have some more videos for you very, very soon.